Hey everyone, and welcome to our second installment of the Let's Lock It Down series. My name is Kevin Wethington, and I'm a principal consultant here at ATC. We appreciate you all taking the time to join us today. We do host these webinars every 2 months, and our next one will be on Thursday, November 16th at 1:30 p.m. After today's webinar, you'll be receiving a follow-up email to register for that. Before we get any further, I want to introduce my good friend and colleague today, ATC's Delta teamer, Cameron Laughlin.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be here with you, Kevin. I am on our Delta team, which means do a lot of client-facing work, project management, audits, analysis of environments, and implementations, and then handing off to our support team. So without any further ado, kind of tell you a little bit about ATC. I think most of y'all know us, but we are an independent IT consulting firm, not a sales organization. We really want to get to know you, our clients, know what's going on in your environments, and have a really good understanding of what's happening before we make any proposition about what a right solution might be. Our background is voice, network, cloud, and security, and we really just want to find that exact right fit for your environment. And we can't do that without knowing where you are today and really where you want to go. So we do that just by getting to know you and really talking through what you have today and kind of where you're headed, adding a lot of education throughout the process.
Okay, so let's dig into what we wanted to cover today. So in our first webinar a couple months ago, we conducted a survey afterwards, and you all sent in some suggestions. We actually took one of those suggestions for our webinar today, and the topic is, what is the difference between EDR, MDR, and XDR? We'll cover that, but provide a little background first on the precursors to these technologies and some advice if you're actually in the market. So quick agenda, evolution of antivirus from this point forward, AV software. The first AV software, AV before AI, lots of acronyms there. We'll look at next gen antivirus software, then of course the 3 acronyms that we talked about, and finally we'll do a couple case studies.
Indeed. And of course, there's time for questions at the end. So yes, if you have questions along the way, please enter them in the chat. We'll have folks monitoring that, and if we do have some time at the end, we'll certainly stay on and answer any questions.
All right, thank you. So if you've been around the IT world for a while, you hopefully smiled really big when you saw these McAfee and Norton antivirus logos. If you didn't know, you can actually go out on Google and find logos by a given year. So hopefully you got a smile out of that. But we're going to talk first about the first AV software.
Either that or the hair stood up on your arms. Just
yeah,
remember what it's like.
That's right. So the first computer virus was created in 1971, and it was called Creeper. Kind of an odd name, but we'll go with it. Then we're going to jump forward quite a bit to the mid to late 1980s. The way I think about this is viruses became a big enough issue by the mid 80s that you could support a business model. So folks like Kaspersky and John McAfee were early pioneers in this area, created the first antivirus software. This software was signature-based virus protection, meaning we're matching a signature of what the virus looks like to what the actual virus looks like in the wild. And if those match, we block it. You can obviously see as threats advanced, the problem with that signature-based approach is novel threats, or sometimes you'll hear them called zero-day threats. Those are the ones that we don't even know about yet. So how can we have a signature, right?
So back then, somebody had to find it, acknowledge it, develop a solution for it, and then make it available to be deployed, which was a very manual process.
And then you had to remember to make sure your signatures were updated in the software for all of the clients. So as you can imagine, this is now considered an antiquated way of providing protection.
Well, and then if you found incidents, right, what were the steps to remediate, right? It was totally different than today, right? When you found an issue, you a lot of times took the machine off the network, dealt with it however you could figure out. A lot of times that was booting into safe mode and being very hands-on with it, on your own. And everybody was kind of doing the same thing, and there weren't a lot of great ways. So from a notification standpoint, how were you notified there was an issue?
Yeah, if you all remember Symantec, which was, as we'll get into next, and other players in this market, they were very noisy and chatty in your system tray.
Well, I was more referring to, if you had an infected PC, did you get an alert from a piece of software? Not generally, right?
Correct.
It was a user, somebody who brought their infected.
Yeah,
PC.
hey, I've got an issue, right?
So not a lot of advanced notification there. The problem was a problem. It was a big problem for somebody by the time you knew about it.
Right.
So then we move on to next gen AV, right?
Yeah, so next generation was a word even 20 years ago, but we continue to use that for the next level of something. And so for next generation antivirus software, this went into a little bit more prevention, went beyond the signature-based protection. It didn't require quite as much human manpower or human power, and as many sets of eyes, to your point, was very manual back in the day.
So at least with this, you could systematically point to update locations, and you could have it pull things automatically, pull still, signatures, and then also, some advanced techniques for
Right.
blocking.
And the next gen part of this new class of software was around the introduction of machine learning and artificial intelligence, which of course we hear a lot about today. But this was the early underpinnings of using that type of technology to detect behaviors and anomalies in those behaviors and begin to alert based off of that, just not signatures. Those algorithms learn more about the user and the system, and it's a more increased level of protection. However, this is still the protect side of things. So this is all pre-infection.
Okay. So then we move to EDR, right?
Yes.
It's our first kind of newer term.
Yeah. So we're going to jump again several years. Actually, EDR, the term was coined in 2013 by Gartner. And the clear distinction here was the detection and the response. We moved from next gen, which was around protect. Now we're moving into detect, which is it's a clear distinction between something we're watching pre-infection. Now we're looking at things after we've already been infected. How do we detect that? And then how do we respond to it now that we know we're infected? So if next gen AV is the first line of defense, EDR is the safety net.
So we're talking about security, right? And networks, but we haven't mentioned firewalls yet, right? Back in the day, it used to be your firewall was your first line of defense, right? And in some ways it still is, but the perimeter has changed, right?
Yes.
So, now our network perimeter extends to our devices, and we have a lot more devices now than we used to, right? It used to be one person had one device that was sometimes connected, and now pretty much every information worker has multiple devices that are always connected regardless of where you are. So
right, there's that device explosion, right? And in the cybersecurity world, we like to say that your attack surface basically quadrupled. We all have got our phone, we've got our laptop, we've got our desktop, we've got our IoT devices, cameras, you name it. They're now all endpoints, right?
And they're interconnected, right? So you may be on your home network, which has a different security profile than your work network. And if your devices are connecting to different networks, then you welcome the opportunity for additional issues.
Right. And then the next thing EDR does beyond next gen is it actually starts to provide remediation suggestions. I like that word suggestions. We'll come back to that later. It's just that they're not going to do any remediation. They're going to suggest things. And then it's in your court to do that.
Response and remediation are two different things,
Yes,
right?
Exactly. EDR does assist with containment. It integrates with threat intelligence. The big idea here is to reduce dwell time, which is, okay, we know we have someone on our network. Let's reduce the time from when they entered the network to when we determined they were on the network. That's called dwell time, and that has continued to grow over time. EDR is one of the solutions to help reduce that amount of time.
And you'll see various providers quoting wildly different timeframes to be able to reduce, get that dwell time down as low as possible. So, all right.
So extended detection and response, XDR, this is EDR's big brother or big sister, whatever, however you want to refer to it. And the key here, the key distinction is we're now ingesting data from multiple sources and integrating that data. It's no longer just the endpoint. The X, we're extending it beyond the endpoint. Now we're talking about network and other devices, device logs, firewalls, et cetera, that are now included into the mix so that we have a better, the SOC, the Security Operations Center has a more view into what exactly is happening in the environment.
So you're looking at SIM tools now where you're collecting all logs, you said all, basically data from several different places to develop a really holistic profile of what the environment looks like and what each of the different, endpoints and, so switches, firewalls, access points, even cloud and IoT can report back to the same location, right? So you have a really, really good view.
And as an increased level of service, XDR also adds some things, some additional AI, better detection, better patterns of behavior detection, and then of course, automated response playbooks. So that we're still talking about, for the most part, your team responding to these events. And so they provide a playbook that says, here's how you respond.
And that's an important distinction too. A playbook means someone's coaching, but you're still running.
That's right. So we went from suggestions.
Right.
Now we're saying, here, we'll give you a playbook that is still on you, right? Okay, great. And then finally, MDR, so managed detection and response. This is basically a service handled by a third party. So it takes EDR, XDR, and even some different flavors, gives you 24/7, 365 monitoring by a third party. That human element is the key distinction here. From a managed EDR perspective, you could have the third party client managing, or excuse me, the third party managing your EDR client. So it's basically SOC as a service, or advanced, which means they are doing the incident response, the boots on the ground, adding people to the team to effectively work the response.
And that's a major shift in mindset, right? From having EDR or XDR, then actually having 24/7, trained experts available to respond to issues, right? We did have a good question here. If I have EDR and next-gen AV, am I protected if I'm working from a Starbucks, free Wi-Fi?
Great question. First, I would say kudos for having both because they are distinct products and you do need both. Are you fully protected is kind of a loaded question. And I would say from an endpoint perspective, you are probably better off than most people in a public Wi-Fi environment. However, I would probably recommend you have some sort of VPN in place so that traffic is encrypted, more for privacy concerns, but also adds a layer of security as well. But of course, in that scenario, you're not really thinking about response or that type of thing. So it's really more the endpoint protection that we're concerned about there.
So if we're talking about connecting back to your network through a VPN, you're essentially using that software-defined perimeter mentality to say, okay, I'm going to extend protection not just to my endpoint, but around my endpoint.
All the traffic, yep.
So I've got all my endpoints, regardless of how they're connected back to my environment. And environments look a lot different now than they used to, right? People have a lot of resources in the cloud. They use a lot of SaaS applications. There are still lots and lots of on-prem applications and databases and other systems that people need to access. So looking at that, topology kind of holistically is important.
Yeah.
Just because you go to the cloud, it doesn't mean that you're more secure than you were before, right?
Yeah, and it's a great question because in another way as well, because we already talked about the device explosion. There's also a location explosion, right? Everyone's remote. The pandemic led that direction. People are working from coffee shops and such, like a Starbucks, more often than ever. And so again, our attack surface has expanded dramatically, and some of these tools are the answer to more protection.
And it's hard to limit the conversation just to the tools, right?
Yes.
Because the tools are kind of point solutions in the overall security posture.
Right.
Right.
If you're a corporation and the person asking our question today is on a corporate laptop in Starbucks, then all of a sudden you are concerned about the managed piece of that response, because the attack surface, the attack vector is more increased now. You're more likely to have an issue, and then you've got response in place if something does happen.
Thanks. So we want to get into a couple case studies, right? We've kind of done our definitions. ATC helps hundreds of clients. We're doing every conversation we have has some level of security in it, right? Whether it's EDR, XDR, MDR, SOC as a service, SIM tools, endpoint protection, lots and lots of different ways to look at this. So we spend a lot of time helping clients analyze their environments, looking at their existing investments in technology, right? Because anybody can say, oh, go buy solution X. Well, that's not a great idea for everybody. There's no one size fits all solution. And people are all over the map with what they've done, what they think they need to do, and probably what they actually need to do. So it's important to have a well thought out plan before you jump into something, because mistakes can be very expensive, as we see every day, and it's kind of daunting when we look at the landscape. So one of our clients has over 1,000 end users, has over 2,500 endpoints. They deployed an XDR solution that gives them, I won't read all the bullet points here, but the thing it really gave them was visibility to what was happening on their network. Before they had endpoint protection and they had firewalls, and their network was, mainly closed. They have 10 to 12 locations, private data network between them. So they were in not a bad place, but going to this level, when issues would happen, they wouldn't necessarily know. So it was more of that kind of legacy view. And that's all too common today, that people are operating with, tools that aren't up to snuff with the latest. So they got that visibility. They also had, somebody telling them when there's a problem, this is where the problem is, this is the playbook to respond to it. And then they also are available to assist if it's needed.
So just to remind folks, XDR here, we're talking about beyond the endpoint. So the network and other devices, they're
Correct.
seeing that additional log data, that visibility that you're talking about.
Correct. So they're not just analyzing things that are coming in and out of the network, north-south traffic, as we refer to it. They're also looking at east-west. So they have network sensors at all their primary locations with the XDR provider that are feeding back into that SIM, so they can get a really good picture of what's happening in the network.
If I think of a castle analogy, EDR might be you just have soldiers on the four corners, or XDR is you've got people all around covering the entire perimeter, right? And more.
It's a good point. It's a good way to look at it. Not sure how to work moat into that, but I really want to.
Please don't.
Yeah. The next one is a little bit smaller client. They have 5 locations. The majority of their 300 people are at one facility, and then they've got some remote sales offices around the country. Some of the vendors are calling their MDR client, or their MDR offering, XDR.
I was going to say, wait a minute, we have another acronym here.
Absolutely. Well, every day there's another big announcement from providers, right? There's a new provider has done, they've released a new product that's going to change the market. They've acquired somebody, which, depending on how much you've been reading today, there's a fairly large one that just happened. There's something, or there's been a breach, or there's another reason to be interested in security, right? So it's really hard to not talk about security a lot. But it's important not to be scared, because there are people that are doing, cybersecurity really, really well. And I think one of the things is not to try to do it yourself, right? This client, the product they deployed, it works on a zero dwell containment method, which essentially means they have 3 different buckets that they classify things. They have a known good, a known bad, and then an in between. So it's really allow, disallow, and quarantine, and ask for answer. So it's a different than many other providers, and a really, really slick offering. So
zero dwell. We talked about dwell time earlier, which EDR was one of the first products to really target reducing that dwell time. Now we have vendors saying zero dwell based on the technology they're using or the approach they're using to not letting things that are unknown sit on the network or even get on the network at all.
Well, and things are going to get on the network, right? There's email. As long as there's going to be email, there's always going to be a way to get something to you, regardless of how many different email filters you may or may not have. An endpoint will be reached at some point. So it's not if, it's when, and it's how are you going to respond to it, right? So having tools in place, and this one, they have sensors as well that, push data out to their SIM. They have 24/7 eyes on glass. They're responding. They're helping you, deal with any remediation. Really, really slick product. So we're purposely not mentioning vendors. We're purposely not mentioning specific clients. So,
but these are real scenarios.
These are absolutely real scenarios. Yeah. And we deal with them all the time.
Got it. And now let me go back quickly to the M and the X. So this is extended. So as I've mentioned, it's beyond the endpoint, but the M means it's managed.
Fully managed.
So there's humans involved to help staff when it comes to that response and recovery remediation, which, as we were saying earlier, is sort of the pinnacle of what you would want to have in place from a security standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things about that, that with the two case studies you mentioned, they had a couple really common things in their environment. They had smaller IT staffs, compared to the size of the organization that they were.
Yeah.
You can probably imagine the smaller client, how many IT people they had.
It's not only IT people, but security focused people, right? And they're hard to find right now.
Like half or maybe a quarter of a person was security focused, just because they had to put that hat on sometimes, right? So what we're seeing is, these small IT teams are made up of people that are really, really smart, right? They couldn't do their job unless they had a great understanding of what was happening in their environments. But they have this do-it-all mentality because that's how they've grown up, that's how they've been trained, and frankly, that's how the organizations kind of want them to be to a point. But what we're seeing is kind of the IT leaders of the future, right now, are not wanting their people to be a jack of all trades, right? Security is too much risk for somebody to just be a part-time security person and be protecting their entire environment. Yeah. So what we're seeing is folks say, you know what? I just want you to know what needs to happen and not necessarily be the one who knows exactly how to do it. Have people for it that know what they're doing, that are trusted, that are always available, that don't, go on vacations or take breaks, or, 24/7 means 24/7, right? So, going to these MDR providers is extremely beneficial.
Yeah. Excellent. So what do folks need to watch out for if they're in the market for this right now?
So understand where you are today, right? That's where it starts and, selfishly, I would say find a partner who knows what they're talking about, who can understand the differences between what the various vendors are coming to you with. Because the marketing all looks very, very similar and the promises look similar. And, being able to dissect that with somebody who can have that agnostic approach and really say, this is what it says, this is what's really happening kind of behind the curtain. So it's really, really important.
The devil's in the proverbial details, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. You might cover the capital R example.
Yeah, so our final little piece here we refer to as the capital R is just kind of reiterating that fact that response, remediation, recovery, all of those R's are sometimes sold or marketed as part of a service or part of a product. And it may not be exactly what you think it is. So make sure that you understand the level of detail, what they really mean when they say they offer response. It could just be an automated alert, which is really not the same as you or me or a staff member responding to a breach. So capital R is sort of the pinnacle of what you want, where you have staff ready at hand to help you with a breach should that happen. And obviously that's going to cost more, but that's what you really need should something happen.
It's maintenance, right? If you look at it like maintenance, it's putting regular spending out there to prevent a major disruption, right? I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but we talked a little bit about, backups and securing your backups. We talk about cloud and how you get from, how you get to a secure position. Right. And one of the things that are, often overlooked is securing your backups. People have cloud backups. Well, how are those being secured?
Right.
And that's another piece that's
recovery.
It's not far off of this topic.
Right.
So
looks like we have another question. So I'm required to do annual penetration tests for compliance. If I had an MXDR solution, like our example, would I still need to complete these pen tests?
Well, there's definitely folks who would say they don't want to. How much security is too much, right? So if you are applying for cybersecurity insurance or you have a plan or a policy, pen test should be part of it, right?
Yeah. That's what I would exactly what I would say is that a lot of times it's compliance or regulation driven and they want it to be conducted as such. Did you have a pen test? Check. As I mentioned in one of my recent blog posts, there's a lot of differences between pen tests and what exactly we mean when we say that. There's different levels of testing, but I think having some sort of offensive piece to your overall cyber program, regardless of whether you have managed service or not, is definitely a good thing.
It's not a bad practice, right? It's definitely a good practice. And if you've never done one, it can be very eye-opening to understand how you're perceived from the outside.
Right, and if you do a double-blind penetration test, for example, you're also testing your vendor, your MDR or your XDR, managed XDR vendor to see how they respond to that pen test.
For sure. So we had one more question here. I know we're getting close on time. Does MDR include an outsourced SOC?
I hate to say it, but it depends, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that goes back to this marketing slide that we're talking about. You really need to read into the details to make sure that it's covered at that level or not. Obviously, to have a full-blown SOC is going to cost more than maybe a stand at ready team, but certainly an option. Okay. All right, well, reminder that you'll be getting a follow-up email from right after the webinar to register for the next one, which is on November 16th. Please send us your future webinar ideas. We love that. And also feel free to set up an appointment with myself or Cameron if you would like us to deep dive a little bit more into your cybersecurity needs. We'll check one more time for questions and then we'll wrap up.
Good.
All right, we're all clear.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your time today, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. See you guys.